Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another episode of Come Together. I am as always, and as always, things are more than a little crazy in my life, but that's the way I like them, which is good. Um, which I think is good. I'm as I stand outside in my backyard in Hollywood, finally getting the first rain over the last I don't know, bunch of months, couple of months, maybe a month or so, month and a half, and it's good for a number of reasons. The first reason is because the water in my pool was getting very low. The second reason is because my whole backyard has just become covered in cigar ashes. Um, I find myself smoking cigars extremely often in the winter. Not more than once a day, but frequently, I'll have a cigar once a day, or I'll have a cigar over the course of 2 days. So half one day, half the next day. Um, and so it kind of washed everything away. It's nice. Feels more like Florida with the rain. And I have been panicking about these drones, but I think I'm panicking less now. I think I'm panicking less now. I'm panicking less now because I initially started. I guess the fear is the absolute unknown, and then your imagination and mind just goes all over the place. Um, and you never know, and then especially with something like a drone, which, I mean, are unidentified weird objects. You never really know what it's going to be, but I mean, I'm pretty convinced at this point that this is American technology, government technology, whether it's part of a bigger threat or not, I don't know. Um, Whether it's legitimate threat or not, I don't know. But it kind of feels better to, I'm pretty confident at this point that it's government. And the only reason why I say that is because I don't think first of all, the government compulsively lies. Um, but they do not compulsively lie when it comes to trying to start problems and wars in other countries. So if there's another country, we'd probably know that because the government would blame them, just like they tried blaming Iran. And if it was aliens, then I think we'd know it also. It's been too long. Nothing, I mean, it just kind of looks like advanced drones that we just haven't seen before. But I think I forgot where I've heard this. Shoot, maybe Lex Friedman's podcast, where well, apparently America is pretty far behind on drone technology relative to the rest of the world because we have much stricter regulations and our innovation has fallen to the wayside relative to China or Russia or the other superpowers of the world. Um, but yeah, I would probably get. So I've been freaking out and the problem is that when you're when everything in the sky is a potential threat, then everything becomes scary, especially at night. Um, you're driving at night. Was that an airplane? Was that a drone? What's those bright lights? Last night I was driving to a new brewery, which ended up being a waste of time. Not a waste of time because it was good to get out, but I didn't get anything and I didn't buy anything, which is a win. So actually, I guess it's a good experience because I don't definitely do not need more beer, and I definitely don't need to be drinking more beer. Um, so I was driving last night. It was one of those gray, cloudy, overcast nights in South Florida, and I saw three bright orbs, you know, a bunch of feet up over the highway, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 feet up over the highway. And I was on the phone with my dad, and I was like, oh, I think those are the drones that we were seeing. And I really was starting to panic a little bit, or at least freak out. And I realized that it was just lights from a nearby, I don't know, stadium or, big building or development or whatever. But yeah, I'm a lot less concerned about that than I was a little while ago, or at least since yesterday. So that's good. Um, there's a lot of things I wanted to talk about today that I'm excited. I'm excited about. I'm excited about it. Well, I mean, I just said that I don't need more beer, and one of the reasons why I don't need more beer is because I'm sitting here and I have one in my hand, and it's a barrel aged barley wine. And what that means is that a barley wine is similar alcohol percentage to a regular wine, generally speaking, anywhere between like 10 and 14%. And when it's barrel aged, it's usually aged in bourbon barrels or rum barrels or whiskey barrels, and they age them for an extended period of time. And these beers, especially if they're still, as in not carbonated, could could sit for a very long time. And on Friday, I was at this brewery called Three Sons in South Florida, which I love. And oh, this place is great. The brewer is so nice. I forgot his name, but he's such a good dude. And they're one of the only. I'll get into that after. And so anyway, so I'm sipping some beer. They have some amazing barrel aged stouts out now. And I like to walk around while I'm drinking the beer. I'm there by myself. I'm walking around. I'm looking at their merch, and I see that they have this beautiful looking bottle, just magnificent with cool writing, and it's still, and it's got a cork in it, and I see that it's a barley wine that's aged for with what they do, which is really nice and fancy and cool, which I think is actually fun because if you're going to charge 30, 40, $50 for a bottle of beer, then you have to present it like a 30, 40, or $50 bottle of beer. You know, you can't just take a can and slap a sticker on it. Like you got to make it look presentable. And to Three Sons is I guess to their credit, they really do make their beers look just magnificent. And what they started doing was dates, putting on the label of the beer what date it was put into the barrel and what date it was taken out, so you can see how long it's been in there for, the other adjuncts that are in there, if they add vanilla or coffee or whatever. So I see this bottle. It's a beautiful looking bottle, and I see that it was the barrel was emptied at the end of 2021. And I'm like, what the heck is this thing? So I brought it over to the brewer, and I brought two of them over because it was $30, and even though it's 375 milliliters, which to put that into context, a regular bottle of wine is 750. So it's about a half a bottle. It's about half the size of a bottle of wine, and it was $30. And I took it to the brewer, and I was like, dude, what's up with this? And he said, you're not going to believe it. He said, this beer is 3 years old. Literally, but it's not. It was barrel aged for over a year. I think he said closer to a year and a half, 2 years. And and he goes, and it's been still for 3 years. And he goes, and I said, but if it's still, I can open it and drink it as frequently as I like, right? He says, yeah, you probably have a week, I'd say, since you open it because there's something called oxidation where when the air contacting the liquid actually changes the flavor. And he said, listen, you probably have a week before, from the time you open it, so when you have to have it finished. And I didn't, and I was going to buy two of them because I figured that it can't be bad. And he said, but the truth is that it's so old that I would buy one and taste it for you. And then if you like it, smoke another, drink, buy another one. And what I ended up doing was I said, how about you and I open one together? How about I buy it now? You and I open it together. We'll both taste it. If it's and then if we love it, then I'll buy the second one. If not, then I'll just take this home and it's fun to experiment and try out. He's like, sure. So we did, and it did not taste great initially. And I'm not sure if it's because my palate was already ruined because I already had those other beers, or whether or not it was because it genuinely did not taste good at first, but it kind of just tasted like sticky leather. And then now I'm having it, and it's really opened up, and it's really a lot more pleasant. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy about that whole experience. But it's fun because it's fun. What I love about the beer world are all these little craft worlds, cigars and beers, and and even things like sports, like UFC. I mean, it's so funny because I've been following UFC now for about a year, and every time I meet someone, like it's not considered a standard thing to like UFC, but when you meet someone that does, then you guys both get excited that you're both into this relatively down low sport, and it's not typical, and So, so I like these little craft or small worlds, intimate worlds where if you're into it, you're into it. And it's kind of like a cult. I guess, yeah, cult worlds. Cult classics, Big Lebowski, Dazed and Confused, Fargo, every Coen Brothers movie, they're all cult classics. But yeah, so it's just such a fun experience to be able to go to a guy that runs a brewery that distributes all over South Florida, all over Florida, really. I've seen the beer all over Florida, and it's a big tap room, and they've been in business for about I think it's maybe maybe 7 or 8 years at this point. They're one of the first breweries in South Florida to really, and they've really done an excellent job. They've had ups and downs throughout the years, but overall, they're really, really a top-notch brewery, and there's something fun about being able to go up to that brewer, just and just say, "Hey, I'm going to buy this expensive bottle that you bought that you made, and you and I are going to drink it together and just have a good time and see how it is because you haven't tasted this in 2.5 years." I think it's a fun time. I think it's really really cool. So, we both did that, and next time, and it's such a wonderful bonding kind of human moment that that it's such a privilege to be a part of it. I was talking to one of my friends from me today, and he mentioned to me we just had our 10-year high school reunion. He didn't go to it because he lives in Israel, and I didn't go to it because I live in South Florida. And out of 150 kids, I think 15 went that are in the tri-state area. And and we were talking. We got to talking about because there was a picture that was posted as to who went and who went from our grade. And it's so funny to see some of these faces from literally a decade ago and how some people look exactly the same and some people just look completely like they've aged 30 years. And I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. I mean, I guess I am not being nice, but I'm not trying to be mean. I think it's just, what happens. And I think that, I could see firsthand that it's very, very easy to kind of slip into unhealthy lifestyles. We're surrounded constantly by things, by forces that are looking for our that are looking for our attention, that are ready to just pounce on us. Whether it's food, whether it's drinking, whether it's Netflix, whether it's social media. All these things are just waiting in line for us, and just waiting for us to abandon our well-being in our lives and instead pursue um, those particular vices, I guess we'll call them. There's a great Doobie Brothers album called "What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits." I think that's the name of the album, and that's an awesome album with some great music on it. But I could see how it happens. What's once a vice, what's once something that you just do every now and then, becomes a little bit more regular, and then you have a little bit more autonomy. And I also think that that probably has a lot to do with the societal normalization of different vices or not, and the way that we view these things. If we view these things as like, oh, this isn't for you because you're a kid, but now that you're an adult, you could be unhealthy and you could be fat and overweight and alcoholic, then like, I mean, yeah, I guess so. But if you just, I mean, of course, just like everything else, it comes down to education. If you teach that these vices are most pleasantly enjoyed and healthy as vices, then you're much more likely, obviously, when you're taught that when you're young, you're much more likely to view it that way when you're an adult. And so I was talking to Rami about these people from high school, and he was telling me it's funny because Rami and I think I mean I know, but we have different natural yardsticks, ways of measuring what success is. Um, and I mean, I kind of feel I find myself, generally speaking, pretty isolated in my perspective because to me, the definition of the word success, literally just means to be good at. Period. it doesn't mean anything. And so obviously, we could have societal context where you say if you're successful, then we know that when almost 10 out of 10 people say, "Oh, are you successful?" They're asking whether you have a lot of money or whether and then occasionally it's whether you have a lot of prestige. But I think to be successful literally just means to be good at. And so the question really is, what is it that you're trying to be good at? Are you trying to be healthy? Are you trying to be, oh man, literally every plane looks like a drone from here. Seriously. Are you trying to be healthy? Are you trying to be in shape? Are you trying to make a lot of money? Are you trying to rise to the corporate ladder? Are you trying to be true to yourself? And then once you kind of discover that, and discover what your intended goals are, then you can go ahead and be successful or not. But there's such a thing as being successful without having an idea as to what yardstick you're using to measure. So we were talking a lot about, we were just talking throughout the day today, just about the notions of, oh, she looks like she's very successful. She's a attorney, and he looks like he's successful. He's at a hedge fund, and she looks successful. She's a lawyer with two kids. Like, cool. I mean, I really hope that they're successful. I really hope that they're accomplishing what it is that they've set out to accomplish in their lives, and they're on their path and they're on the way to do it. But I don't know, and I don't think you're ever going to know, and that's why I don't really think that it's particularly fair or reasonable to kind of judge based on metrics that you don't know that everyone else is using. And I actually think that that's where most of the world's miscommunication happens. I think a lot of times we use words that we don't know what they mean, or they have more than one meaning or different potential contexts. And so when you say that word and you mean what you mean, the definition that you're talking about, right? So if I say, "Oh, someone asked me, are you successful?" I'd probably say, kind of. I mean, I don't know, because I know that when they ask me if I'm successful, it means do I make a lot of money and do I have prestigious positions? Um, I do not have a lot of money, so that's one. And and I don't have what I don't think most reasonable people would be considered prestigious jobs are. Right? I don't. It's not very prestigious to have a small podcast to teach in a to teach high school English in a for 2 hours in the afternoon, 4 days a week, and to work in the family business as a sales and operations manager, whatever. You don't even need the word manager, just sales and operations. Um, I mean, is it prestigious? I don't know. I wouldn't be blown away if I heard someone did that. I would be pretty surprised that someone had the time to do that. And and am I successful? I mean, again, I don't have a lot. I don't have an enormous amount of money, so But if you asked me if I'm successful, I don't think that I would really change anything about my life. I know I wouldn't change anything about my life actually, and and in that regard, I am successful. And if someone, I mean, it's funny because it's not like it's a tangible point where you say, ah, now I've reached here, and now I'm successful. And I think that's also another trap that we tend to fall into. We're waiting for these kind of weird milestones where we could say, now I've done everything I need to do. Now I've seen everything. Now I've done everything. Now I've checked off my bucket list. I mean, we're still alive as far as we're concerned. So what you could say is I'm successful so far. I mean, as far as 29 goes, I'm pretty successful because I'm doing what I value the way that I value it for the most part, and with some days sometimes I'm better. Some days I'm better about the way that I use my time and effort and energy, and sometimes I'm a lot worse about it. And that's okay. And it's but I think overall I feel it's. So I mean, and you know, the whole point of this conversation is just that I would, you know, and that's what's fun about having relationships with people is that you're never going to know what it means, whether someone's successful or not, until you get to know them, until you get to know what it means when they say the words that they say. And and then when you get to know them, then you kind of have that close relationship where, you know, whether or not they're there, you're successful in having that relationship to a certain degree, and at least you guys are on the same page about what these terminologies and definitions are. I was teaching my class about identity, um, and what makes us who we are. And I thought that, and I mean, right now, this information is kind of primarily based again on that book Chatter by Ethan Cross. It's funny because I go through books that I'm reading, and then obviously they'll come up on podcasts. So I guess it's a good reason to keep on. It's a good reason to keep reading because it gives me content, and it's good to record because it makes sure that I know the material and that I'm processing it, and that the fact that I'm speaking it out really makes sure that it's imprinted in my brain. But so in this book, Chatter by Ethan Cross, he talks about our sense of selves, and it's so interesting because my perspective on these things has really, really, really evolved in the last bunch of years, but it really exploded from say about 10 years ago, since I guess high school. I used to really look at everything in the world like black and white. You're cool or you're not, popular or you're not. You have a lot of money or you don't. You're a success or you're a failure. You know, like to me, there was very little middle ground. It was very extreme, and it also had to do with my relationship with myself because there are a lot of times where I tell myself, "You're an absolute loser," and was I an absolute loser? Absolutely not. Was I more of a loser than a winner that day? 100%. um, and then when I'm getting this information from this chatter book and what I'm reading, and you know, and as the pieces are coming together, I realize that this has been my experience until now. So our chatter in our head is a built-in mechanism that serves to protect us mostly, although it could harm us, and to it serves to make sure that we're constantly preserving ourselves, we're constantly examining the past, future, and the present, and we're making sure that and basically to keep us on our toes, or daydreaming, spacing out, dreams, our you know when you're looking over the when you walk out into the street and you think of a bunch of wild potential things that could happen, and you discard them as the thoughts occur. Nope, not likely. Nope, not realistic. Nope, not going to happen. Might happen, but probably not. You know, like all these things have all these thought processes have exist for a reason, and those same thoughts also help us define who we are. Now, our identity is obviously built in some part on our actions, right? Um, I wouldn't quite say you are what you do, although I think at a certain point when you're harming other people, you become that. But action is one of the components in our sense of self. How we act, how we behave, how we spend our time, and then we have our intention. An intention either fortifies and strengthens ourselves to an action, or we distance ourselves from an action. So for example, tonight I got home from teaching, and I was about to go, and I got back and my wife had made dinner, and I gave her a heads up I was going for a jog when I got back. So I got back and I was about to sit down and record. I was about to go outside and record this podcast. My wife said, "Well, you know, I just cooked dinner. I just cooked dinner. Are you hungry?" And I said, "I'm not." And recently I've had this experience where I have a hard time eating when I have a lot on my mind, when I feel like I have a lot to do. I just feel like eating isn't the thing for me to be doing at that point. So I said, no, I thank you, but I think I'd rather wait till after I record the podcast. And I obviously did not mean to be insulting or upsetting or dismissive or anything like that. And she responded, "Well, it's just not so. It's not, and it's not so nice. I, I made dinner, and you came home. I was dealing with a kid for the last couple of hours who's not feeling well, and you come home and you go straight for a jog, and now you're going to go for another 45 minutes or an hour and record a podcast. I wish I just, I really would have I would have appreciated if we had dinner. And if you just stop right there, my actions, my words, my actions are probably not nice and they're probably not great and my wife feels hurt. And I responded and I said at first I said, okay, let me just take a shower. And as I got out of the shower, I said, you're right. We should eat before our podcast, and I'm sorry. I didn't think about how much time it took. I didn't think about what a long day you had, and I'm sure you're hungry, and I'm hungry too. And I really appreciate you making dinner. Let's sit down, let's eat. And so what I did was I had expressed, even though I didn't obviously say the words verbatim, I had expressed that I'm distancing myself from my actions. My intention was not to hurt her feelings. My intention was not to blow her off. My intention was just that I had a lot on my mind, and I wanted to check those things off. Excuse me, the proverbial checkbox before I sit down and eat. I wasn't trying to be mean, and so, but by me apologizing, I distanced myself from that action. Her husband Ephraim is not there. It did not mean to hurt my feelings. He wasn't. He really just was busy. And so now I'm not as hurt. But if I said, I don't like your food and I don't like what you made, so I'm going to go record a podcast, obviously that's another game. And obviously the same words or the same perspective would would be fortified, enforced, or strengthened because I clearly meant what I said when I, and I, when you get, when you're mad at someone and you just say something and you just spit something mean, something nasty, something that is going to bother them or hurt them. And, and just spit at them and you see that you hurt them and you know that you did. And they know that you meant it. That's the power of intention. That's what intention takes words that could be, that could be one way or the other, and they really add an enormous amount of depth and intent. And I don't want to use the word intention again, but oh man, every single thing in the sky looks like a drone, and it's so stressful. Um, it just brings you closer to your actions, and so that's another component as to who you are, right? Because now, if I go ahead and I inadvertently hit someone on if I'm jogging and I run a little old lady over inadvertently, of course, I say I'm so sorry. That woman thinks I'm a jerk, and I think to myself, I'm not a bad guy. I said I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. So my intentions have outweighed my actions, at least in my own head, and so I don't perceive myself to be uh, I don't perceive myself to be a mean person or a bully. And that's part of my sense of self and that's part of my identity. The other part of our identities that help fortify our thoughts and perspectives about ourselves is our the amount of effort that we expend to something. And if you think, when I was growing up, my siblings and I'm the oldest. My siblings and I used to make occasionally for my mom and my dad, depending on whose turn it was or what the day was like. We'd make them breakfast in bed every now and then. So if it was Mother's Day or Father's Day or a birthday or if someone was sick, we'd make them breakfast in bed, and we'd go, so all of us would wake up early. We knew that my parents were still sleeping, We'd all hustle downstairs. We'd fly down. We'd creep down the stairs, try not to wake them up. Go to the kitchen, inadvertently slam some cabinets and drop some pots and pans that would probably have woken them up anyway. Probably did wake them up. And, and then we'd go through the fridge, and with our very limited resources, because it's whatever's in the fridge, because we're 10, or I'm 10, or 12, or whatever's in the fridge, we tried to make um, this beautiful boutique, fancy breakfast in bed for my parents. And this breakfast would consist of usually whatever fruit we could dig out of the back of the fridge. So if there's an apple or an orange, we just slice it and try to make it look nice on a plate, even though we almost never did. And then we'd make a couple of pieces of toast or some eggs or some oatmeal, and the eggs were always kind of like stuck and burned in the bottom because you'd forget to cook the spray, the cooking spray, or whatever, the toast would be burnt, and we'd all hustle upstairs, and my parents would be in bed. We'd come barging into the room, and we'd have a hot chocolate or a tea, and this burnt piece of toast, and some eggs, and a sliced up apple. And we'd be like, "Ta-da! We brought you breakfast." And 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 again, if your identity is just your actions, that's a pretty crappy breakfast. But we knew, my parents knew the amount of effort that it took. We woke up early and we wanted to treat them and we wanted to take care of them. And we knew that and they knew that. And part of the way that we're going to take care of them, part of the way we're really going to show them how much we love them and how much we appreciate them, part of what we're going to do is we're going to do our best with making breakfast. So I feel like, so if you tell me, oh, tell me about Ephraim Herschmann. Well, you know what? I'm really caring because I make breakfast in bed for my parents I made breakfast in bed for my parents when I was growing up. And while that is cool, it's not like really particularly impressive. But my identity is wrapped up in I'm a good person now. I put so much effort into this, and we actually feel more invested in these things. There's something there's something about I was also talking to my students about this today. There's something about the the need for effort, the need to feel like we're working for something, that when that actually happens, it's the best feeling ever. And, so for example, if you're a student, one of my best friends from growing up, Jason, who's brilliant, head and shoulders, over almost anyone else I know for the most part, just one of the smartest guys around. And, he didn't have to study for high school very much. He didn't have to work very hard. And so even though he got good grades, I mean, if you think about the components that make someone a good student, I mean, the end result is pretty much the grade. But what makes a good student is someone that is able to learn, someone that has discipline, someone that can participate, someone that can communicate, someone that is restructuring and and recreating who they are and growing. And and someone that is just really smart and grasps the material right away and doesn't need to study, doesn't need to crack a book, they might be a good student. They might get good grades, but I don't know if they're a good student. I remember that he used to tell me before he went off to college, he's like, I'm going off to school, and it's a much better or much more prestigious and much more challenging school than anything I've ever dealt with before. And it's scary because I don't know that I've never sat and studied for 4 or 5 hours for a test. I've never had to reread chapters to try to understand what was going on. And what he was essentially saying to me was he was trying to figure out how to be a student. And I said, so I asked my students, is he a good student or not? And I mean, obviously, there's always different answers and always mixed thoughts on this, as there should be. And I'm not saying that he wasn't a good student. I'm just making the argument that it's not so black and white. And on a similar note, I mean, how much better does it feel to put effort into a relationship and then make it through, as opposed to having an effortless friendship that and I mean, I bet I'm gonna have to read about this or read some studies about this, or go look into some research about this. But there has to be research into what friend that tribulations and challenges that people experience in a friendship, that how much richer are those friendships where you've had to put in effort to maintain the friendship, where you've had to put an effort into calling, you had to put effort into settling disagreements and arguments, and how much more rich and sturdy are those relationships relative to the ones that require very little effort. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that all this certainly ties into our identity. So right now, and then finally, the last step of our identity is our history. So, or one of the last steps, I guess. But so right now we have our actions as the part of our identity, how I behave, how do I spend my time, how do I have X amount of energy in the day or X amount of time in the day, how am I using it? That's one. Number two is, what's my intention behind my actions and my behavior? Am I living on autopilot? Am I being very intentional about what I'm doing? And the difference is enormous, because I teach for 2 hours a day, but I call myself a teacher because because I put most of my intention throughout the day towards that. I put my intentions towards preparing a class. I generally judge how I feel about a day based on how well or not a class went. There have been the rare weeks where I've had great classes and no sales, or very little sales, and I felt way better about those weeks than I felt about the weeks where I've made a ton of sales and my classes were awful. And so I guess so. And if you ask me, about my identity, I would be much more inclined to say I'm much more of a teacher than I am almost anything else, even though I spend less of my time doing so. But this is all about my identity and the chatter in my head. And then obviously there's effort, which is how much, how hard are you working to achieve the goal, whether it even manifests or not. If my wife called me and she said, our kid's sick and the house is a mess and dinner's burning, can you please come home? And I get in the car and I rush home and I fly through traffic and I get pulled over, and I zip into the driveway and I jump out of the car while it's still running and I burst through the front door, and everything's in order, and the kid and the house is okay, and she managed to figure everything out, right? That all that effort reinforces in my sense of self, and also to my wife, I'm sure, but mostly to myself, which is more important, that I'm a good husband, that I'm a good father, that I'm someone that cares, that will put in the effort if need be. And it happens to be that at the end of the day, the desired outcome didn't occur, but me putting in the effort definitely did. And then there's our history, and our history is, what allows us to forgive ourselves in moments where we're not perfect, right? Where if like, I consider myself a good husband, if I say something mean to my wife and it hurts her feelings, obviously, aside from apologizing, which is, what every decent human being should do anyway, but aside from apologizing, part of what this is I really, I have this history of not behaving like this. This isn't like you. What do you mean this isn't like you? This is what you just did. Well, it's not like what you usually do. That's what's important. It's not like what I usually do. And that kind of, and so our history helps us keep our lives a story and a narrative, and allows us to stay consistent or to build on ourselves, or allows for development. But all these things, but all these features are naturally built into the way that that our identity and our sense of self works. So I thought that was really fun. I thought that was really cool. Going into the future of this podcast, which I'm very excited about, I have a couple of ideas that I'm spitballing, but I'm going to speak them out. A, to try to make them happen, and B, because I think they're really good ideas, and C, because it's good content. Um, I thinking of starting to categorize the episodes based on the topic of the person that I'm talking to, because I've been working on getting more guests that are more professional in different industries, and I'm very excited about it. But part of what's going to be so much fun, or what I envision the future of the podcast is going to be, is that you go to the show page, and you could search psychology, and all the episodes with all the therapists, psychologists, scientists, researchers that I'll talk to will pop up. If I put up, for example, University of Miami, which is local, has a really cool marine biology program, or aqua. I forget what it's called. Aquatic life, I guess. Study and research, obviously in Miami, and if I get into nature or animals or whatever, if I start talking to people about those kind of guests, the natural world, the animal kingdom, then I'll put those as a category. And so the vision ultimately will be that even though I'm talking to a lot of people in this podcast doesn't have one particular direction that it's heading, that you could at least choose to navigate through the episodes that interest you, rather than just scrolling through a lot of content. Because again, I do hope to build this up. I'm putting out less podcasts than I would like to. I would like to put out 4 or 5 a week, and I'm putting out 2, 3, or 4, if I'm lucky, 4 a week. So I would very much like for that to be the case, but that's where we are. I already started reaching out to some musicians and music teachers. Professors are going to be I think the way that I'm going to get into this, because I could go to any university's website and find the professor's email address. Just find the professor, read their biography, read their credentials, and just get them to just reach out to them and see if they'll come on. So I might not get a lot of luck in that. And part of what I'm figuring is that if I reach out to 20, I bet the ratio of responses to emails I get is probably going to be about 1 to 20. I bet if I follow up, it'll probably be 1 in 15. I bet a couple more people will respond if I follow up. And then of those 1 in 15 or 20, I bet every couple, I mean, the first thing they request is just to maybe have a conversation and sit down with them, and then see if we have good enough chemistry to do a podcast together. But that's what I kind of envision for the future. I'm very excited about it. And I think that just about wraps up my thoughts on the matter. So, l'chaim, with my last sip of barley wine. By the way, end of that barley wine story is that the barley wine he was selling this little bottle, $3.75, again, half a bottle of wine. He was selling it for $30, and he told me that the original price that he was selling them for was actually $75 for a half a bottle of wine of this beer. So pretty crazy, but that's it. So have a good night, everyone, and we will be back soon.